The boardroom's glass walls caught the morning sun and spilled it across the polished oak table, turning the harbor skyline into a watercolor behind me. I'd rehearsed this presentation for days, slides precise, numbers airtight. Quarterly downtime reduction 98%, I said, clicking to the next chart. The integrated logistics system has saved Vantage over $1.2 million this quarter alone. The words felt solid, like the concrete pilings under the ships I'd grown up around. A few heads nodded. The CFO scribbled something in his leather notebook. Cassandra Wren sat 3 seats down, angled slightly away from me, her lipstick the same sharp red as the folder in front of her. It's not rocket science. Ariel, she cut in, voice slicing through my sentence. Honestly, anyone can do what you do. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Someone cleared their throat. I kept my eyes on the screen, but my pulse spiked. Let's continue, I said evenly, clicking to the next slide. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the glow of Cassandra's laptop. She hadn't closed her email. In the subject line, System Transition Roadmap, my gaze flicked lower. First bullet point, in crisp black font, Phase 1, Terminate Ariel Voss. The rest blurred, a fog of corporate euphemisms. I forced my voice steady, finishing the section on projected cost savings while heat climbed up my neck. I'd been blindsided before in my career, but this was different. This wasn't an offhand insult. This was a plan, one already in motion. When the COO asked about long-term maintenance projections, I answered smoothly, almost automatically, the numbers rolling out like tidewater. Inside, the humiliation and the revelation braided into something sharper. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, faint smile curling at the corner of her mouth as if she'd already won. I closed the presentation with a polite nod, accepted the brief patter of applause from the more diplomatic executives, and gathered my notes. On the walk back to my office, the corridor felt longer than usual, the hum of muted conversations and clicking keyboards muffled under the sound of my own thoughts. If Cassandra thought she could erase me cleanly, she was underestimating the architecture she was trying to inherit. And me. By the time I reached my desk, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The weeks leading up to that boardroom ambush had been a slow erosion. Cassandra had a talent for making theft look like leadership. At first, it was smaller architecture instead of Ariel's architecture during team updates. Then I stopped getting invites to client calls I'd always led, replaced by her smiling face on the video conference screen. When project reports went upstairs, my name shrank to the bottom in a smaller font or disappeared entirely. She called it documentation best practice, but the level of detail she demanded was surgical. Every sequence, every dependency, every redundant safeguard spelled out. It was the kind of thing no manager had ever asked for unless they were trying to make someone replaceable. My father's voice had been in my head the whole year. He'd worked shipyards his entire life, building engines that kept vessels alive in storms. Build your systems like a ship, he used to say. Seaworthy only if the captain knows the waters. I'd taken it to heart. My systems weren't just lines of code, they were navigation charts, designed so that only someone who understood the currents could keep them on course. The operational sequences were precise, multi-layered validations, cross-system checks, maintenance routines with timing that mattered. Skip a step, and the system wouldn't fail immediately, it would degrade. Slowly at first, then all at once. It wasn't sabotage. It was self-defense against careless hands. That night, after everyone left, I moved quietly through my office, family photo into my tote, the ceramic mug from my niece wrapped in a sweater. Backup drive slid into the inner pocket of my laptop bag, my personal property, my personal notes, The humming servers down the hall kept running, indifferent to the politics that surrounded them. I wiped down my desk until it looked like a generic workstation. No post-its, no coffee rings, no trace of me. It was as if I'd never been there at all. Locking the door behind me, I felt lighter. Not free yet, but ready. Cassandra thought she was cutting away something dead weight. She didn't see she was pulling the only lifeline she had. Tomorrow, she'd start to feel the slack in the rope. The harbor was hidden behind a curtain of fog when I stepped into Cassandra's office the next morning. The blinds were drawn halfway, casting her desk in stripes of pale light and shadow. In the center sat a folder stamped in block letters, Termination of Employment. She didn't bother with preamble. Ariel, your work has become inconsistent, she began, flipping the folder open with deliberate slowness. Your attitude toward management directives has also been problematic. I stood still, hands at my sides, watching her arrange her words like chess pieces. You're not indispensable, she added, as though the phrase tasted good in her mouth. We'll bring in consultants, fresh eyes, new perspectives. I almost smiled. Consultants who would inherit a map without a compass. I see, I said, pulling a folded sheet from my bag and placing it on the desk between us. Her brow creased as she read the header, Letter of Resignation. This is unexpected, she said flatly. Just clarity, I replied. Her hand hovered over the paper for a moment before she signed it with a single, impatient stroke. It will handle the transition. We'll be fine. I nodded once, then left without offering my hand. Walking back to my office, I could feel her gaze at my back, but she didn't follow. I slid into my chair for the last time, opened the admin console, and began deleting my personal profile's super user access. API keys tied to my credentials, encrypted sequences only I knew how to navigate, not sabotage, just closing doors that no longer belonged to me. When I shut the laptop, the desk was already empty, the drawers bare. I carried my bag down the hallway without looking back. Somewhere behind me, Cassandra was congratulating herself for cutting loose someone she thought was dead weight. She hadn't yet heard the sound a client makes when the safety net is gone. The Charles River moved in slow, steady ripples beneath the pale morning sun. From my table by the window, I watched a rowing crew cut through the water in perfect sync, their oars rising and falling like clockwork. The hiss of the espresso machine blended with the low hum of conversation, a soundtrack I hadn't heard during working hours in years. My phone buzzed against the saucer. Mike Alvarez. Portals lagging bad. Reports look wrong. I took a sip of coffee before replying. The cause was obvious. Every Monday morning, I'd run a maintenance sequence database indexing, log purges, cache refreshes. Without it, the system would drag like a boat with a fouled propeller. Have you told Cassandra? I typed. His response came fast. Yeah. Says the new consultants are on it. Honestly, they look lost. I leaned back in my chair, the steam from my cup curling toward my face. What are they asking for core documentation? I smiled faintly. They had the manuals I'd written for the user-facing parts, how to generate reports, process orders, adjust inventory counts. But the real heart of the system, the connective tissue of logic and dependencies, wasn't something you could capture in a bullet point guide. It lived in my head, and in code comments that only made sense if you understood the architecture as a whole. The system wasn't just programs, it was a layered structure. Foundation, frame, walls, roof. Take away the wrong support beam, and you wouldn't notice the problem immediately. Not until the entire structure shifted under its own weight. I typed back, "Give it time." He didn't reply, and I didn't expect him to. I stirred the last of the foam into my coffee, watching it swirl and vanish. The first fracture had appeared, hairline and quiet. It wouldn't stay that way for long. By mid-afternoon, the cafe had emptied out to a few students with laptops and a pair of retirees sharing a pot of tea. I was halfway through drafting a proposal for a potential consulting gig when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in the 6-Wetsventine area code made me swipe. Ariel Voss. Ariel, this is Linda Cormack, COO of Red Harbor Freight. A brisk, clipped voice announced, "Do you have a moment?" I straightened in my chair. Red Harbor wasn't just any client, they were one of Vantage's biggest accounts. A contract Cassandra had paraded through quarterly meetings like a trophy. "We can't get shipment confirmations through the portal," Linda continued. "Our trucks are waiting on docks. Containers are stuck in processing. My team says you built the system. Can you check what's wrong?" I let a beat pass. "I'm no longer with Vantage," I said evenly. "You'll need to coordinate with Cassandra Wren or her technical team." There was a pause, followed by a dry laugh. "Your boss is about to sink this contract," she muttered, not quite under her breath. In the background, I caught fragments of raised voices, someone barking about missed deadlines, another about breach penalties. A phone slammed down hard enough that the thud carried through the line. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said, and meant it. "It's not my place to step in without being engaged directly. I'll take that up with her," Linda replied, her tone sharpening. "But for what it's worth, I've been in this business long enough to know when the wrong person is steering the ship." We ended the call with polite goodbyes, but the sound of that war zone in the background lingered long after I set my phone down. I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting the muted winter light spill across my table. Somewhere in Vantage's glass tower, Cassandra was still convinced she could weather this without me. I wondered how much more Red Harbor and the other top clients would tolerate before the cracks became impossible to patch. The call came just after 5, my phone vibrating across the table with her name on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Ariel," Cassandra said, her voice tight, words clipped like she was trying to hold them together. "We're having just a few glitches. Could you pop in for a few hours to help the team get back on track?" I let a slow breath out, keeping my tone even. "My emergency consulting rate is $600 an hour, 4-hour minimum. Paid in advance." Silence. Then a sharp laugh without humor. "That's ridiculous. You used to make that in a day, not an hour." "That's the market rate for what you're asking," I said, my fingers resting lightly on the rim of my coffee cup. "If you think someone else can handle it, you should call them. Ariel, good luck. Cassandra." I ended the call before she could finish. The room was quiet except for the hum of my laptop fan. I poured the last of my coffee into the sink, the rich smell lingering in the air, and sat back down to finish my notes for another client. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike. 3 clients threatening legal action. Heard Cassandra slam her door so hard the blinds fell. I smiled, not out of malice, but from the clarity of cause and effect. Cassandra had been so certain the systems could be handled by fresh eyes, and now those eyes were watching the structure buckle under pressure. I typed back a simple, "hang in there." Then I set my phone face down and returned to my work. Knowing the clock had just started ticking louder in Cassandra's world, I woke to the gray light of morning spilling across my bedroom and the insistent buzz of my phone on the nightstand. 14 missed calls. The caller list was a solid block of Cassandra's name, interrupted only by 2 from an unknown office number I recognized as Vantage's main line. I scrolled to the newest voicemail and pressed play. Her voice came through hoarse and frayed, the veneer of control stripped away. "Ariel, please, we need you." The update failed. Overnight pending invoices are gone. The transaction queue is frozen. Name your terms. I lay back against the pillows. letting the silence after her words fill the room. The system's update process wasn't complicated if you knew the layers, but skip the built-in sequence and you could lose hours of transactional integrity in a heartbeat. I set the phone down and got dressed for the gym. By mid-morning, I was pushing through the last set on the rowing machine, the sweat running down my spine, a steady reminder that I was operating on my schedule, not hers. A few more messages buzzed in shorter, more urgent. None of them I answered. From the gym, I headed to the north end. Lunch was grilled calamari, a glass of chilled white wine, and the lazy rhythm of conversation from the neighboring tables. I lingered over espresso, letting the rich bitterness settle on my tongue while the harbor breeze slipped in through the open door. Only when the check was paid and the last sip of water gone did I pull out my phone and type a reply, 2 p.m. Your office. I didn't wait for her acknowledgement. I knew she'd see it instantly. I knew she'd be there. Walking back to my car, I could almost picture her pacing behind that glass wall, consultants in tow, error logs piling higher by the minute. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be a rescue mission. It would be a negotiation, and this time, I'd be holding every card. At 2 p.m. sharp, I stepped into Vantage's operations center. The wall-sized dashboards glowed an angry red, each panel stacked with error messages and stalled process alerts. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and panic. Consultants hunched over their laptops, shoulders tight, fingers flying without rhythm. Paper was scattered across the long table printouts of code, scribbled flowcharts, and half-finished diagrams. Cassandra hovered near the door, her expression caught somewhere between relief and exhaustion. She gestured me inside but didn't try to speak. The lead consultant turned, and I felt a flicker of recognition. Owen Driscoll. 2 years ago, he'd applied to join my team. His resume was bloated with jargon, but his code review had been a mess, sloppy, insecure, untested. I'd passed without hesitation. Now, apparently, he'd been entrusted with optimizing my architecture. "What exactly have you changed?" I asked, sliding into a chair. Owen leaned forward, pulling a binder toward me. "We streamlined a lot of unnecessary complexity," he said, like a student eager for praise. Removed redundant validation layers, got rid of excess error handling routines, and disabled caching to prevent outdated data from surfacing. It should have improved performance. I scanned the code printouts, each page a record of surgery without anesthesia. They'd stripped away the safeguards that kept the system stable under strain, dismantled the routines that caught and corrected bad data before it could spread, and turned off the caching structure that ensured speed when dozens of users hit the database at once. I set the binder down. "You took the immune system out of the patient," I said, my voice calm but flat. "And now you're wondering why it can't fight off the infection." Owen shifted in his seat, but no one else spoke. Cassandra stood a few feet away, hands clasped tightly in front of her, waiting for me to tell her how bad it really was. I pushed the binder back toward them. "This isn't a patch job. It's a rebuild, and the price tag just went up." Cassandra led me into one of the glass-walled conference rooms, the kind with a table big enough to seat a jury. She closed the door behind us and sat across from me, shoulders tight, eyes guarded. I set my notebook on the table and spoke before she could start. $200 an hour for emergency fixes, $150 for regular support, 4-hour minimum for emergency calls, payment in advance. Her brows shot up. "That's more than double your salary," I said evenly, "was for an employee you could direct as you pleased. This is for a specialist who chooses when, how, and if she works for you." She exhaled slowly, trying to smooth the sharp edges from her voice. "We could commit to a longer-term contract if you're willing to come down on the rate. Something stable for both sides." I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch, filling the space between us until it became uncomfortable. Negotiation 101, whoever speaks first loses ground. Her gaze flicked to the pile of error logs she'd brought into the room, then to the frosted glass door as if hoping someone would interrupt. No one did. Finally, she said, "Fine. 200 for emergencies, 150 for regular, 4-hour minimum, but we'll need to own the code you write for us." "No," I said simply, "I retain all IP rights to any new code. You'll get usage licenses if I walk. That code walks with me." Her jaw tightened for a moment. I thought she might push back, but the weight of her current situation seemed to settle on her shoulders. She reached for the pen. The moment the nib touched paper, her phone buzzed against the table. The name Linda Cormack lit up the screen. Cassandra froze for a heartbeat, then turned the phone face down and signed the contract without looking at me. I slid the papers back into my notebook, noting the tension in her jaw and the slight tremor in her hand. She didn't know it, but that call had told me exactly how much time she had left before the damage became irreversible. The rebuild took 3 long days. I worked from the same corner of the operations center each morning, headphones in, coffee at my side, shutting out everything but the code, one by one. I restored the validation layers, rebuilt the error handling routines, reactivated the caching systems. Every safeguard went back in place, not as it had been, but stronger, refined from lessons learned. While I was in there, I added something new, discrete monitoring tools, buried deep in the architecture. They would alert me directly if the system started to drift, if someone skipped maintenance or tried to simplify what they didn't understand. Not a trap, just an early warning system, the kind a captain installs after seeing the hull breached once. By the end of the 3rd day, the dashboards were green across the board, reports were generating in seconds, shipment confirmations flowed without delay, and the warehouse staff had stopped looking like they were bracing for disaster. The first calls from clients came in that afternoon, not to complain but to compliment. Red Harbor's COO sent a brief email, smooth sailing again. "Whatever you did, thank you." Cassandra appeared at my table later, a paper cup in hand like it might soften her expression. "Ariel, I wanted to thank you," she said, voice halting. "The system's running better than before. I think we could." She hesitated. "Offer you a senior architect position, with a significant raise." I closed my laptop and stood. "I appreciate it, but I choose who I work with now." She nodded, though her eyes flickered with something unspoken. We signed off on the last of the contract paperwork that evening, when I walked out of Vantage's glass doors into the cooling night air. I felt the shift in my footing, not just away from this building, but towards something entirely mine, in business. Some mistakes cost money. Others, like underestimating the person who built the ship you're sailing, can sink you entirely. They'd called my work worthless. Now they called it indispensable, and they paid exactly what it was worth to get it back.